Final Fantasy XI Online, developed by Squaresoft, and originally released in 2002 in Japan for the PlayStation 2, being the first MMO Final Fantasy title that is still running to this day with a strong player base, with developers even mentioning how surprised they were that they maintained their player base even after the release of Final Fantasy XIV, but they're two very different kinds of MMOs, so it makes sense why players are still here. Final Fantasy XI is the last Meta Final Fantasy entry that I have not played, and it was not due to its nature of being an MMO. I enjoy MMOs actually, it's just more subscription-based MMO, so... But now it's finally time to me to play it for its 21st anniversary, with them doing a big celebration, on top of the fact that the version that I'm playing, that can be played nowadays on PC, is a version that is heavily updated with many things designed to help newcomers into the game, and there are some unique ways they try to support newcomers into Final Fantasy XI. The main premise is that 20 years after the Crystal War, the world of Vana'diel is now under threat again, with there being three main nations of Sandoria, Bastok, and Windhurst, all being occupied by the different races that the player gets to make their character based off of. And while these kingdoms are constantly arguing and aren't exactly together, there are also the Beastmen, an entire also different race of creatures that some people wish to actually get allegiance with, but most people see them as a threat to Vana'diel, with there being talks and rumors of the possibility of the Beastmen restoring the Shadow Lord, a major threat during the Crystal War 20 years ago. This is where your player character comes in, being an adventurer, part of this huge age of adventurers, being tasked by one of the three kingdoms to actually go around and find out what exactly is going on with the Beastmen, possibly try and gain some allegiance with the other kingdoms, although, like I said, these people do not like each other, and I do like to note that depending on what race and kingdom you're going to as part of the story, you may have people from the other races basically insult you to your face, or people of your race telling you, listen, I know these guys are like, but you just put up with them, gotta do some stuff with them. So I do like the fact they highlight how separate and pretty much combative the kingdoms are, even if they are currently going after the same threat of the Beastmen. I also like how later on in the main story, you also learn of this major party that set out to adventure 20 years ago during the Crystal War, and what exactly happened with them in regards to the Shadow Lord being defeated many years ago, and now the possibility that they may be back somehow. For the content of this video, my player character is an Elven, and I started out with the Kingdom of Sandoria, which apparently lined up perfectly since Sandoria is a kingdom of proud elven warriors, so good on me on that one. But you will get different scenarios and starting missions when it comes to the game depending on which locale you decide to start out in. Like I mentioned, it's like interaction with NPCs and stuff, where they may or may not take a liking to your character depending on what race they are. While the base main game story of Final Fantasy XI serves way more as world building in order to pave way for expansions later on, I do enjoy the base story of Final Fantasy XI because the character interactions just really make it for me when it comes to the story being told and what is actually going on and how the kingdoms could theoretically just fix this problem. They just weren't so aggressive towards each other. I also like that as an adventurer, for the most part, you're having your missions given to you by essentially these chief officers, and then later on it then escalates to more of people from the kingdom and royalty now personally picking you. So I like how it progresses from just being this person they're sending a check to do these basic stuff to now this being more serious. We now need you more talking with the king, the royalty, personal missions for them, etc. because the situation now calls for it, and you have now proven yourself to be someone of that level. Now for the main gameplay of Final Fantasy XI, being an MMORPG, but it is one that was specifically designed with the PlayStation 2 in mind. So there are a lot of awkward stuff if you're playing the game now on PC, because of the fact that the way it's controlled is designed primarily for you to be playing just with a keyboard or with a gamepad. In fact, the way I'm playing using a mouse and keyboard is ironically probably the worst way to play it because the mouse controls weren't exactly refined. Like, you'll notice, like, when I'm hovering over stuff, there'll be some text, dialogue, or button options where I have to be closer to the left side of it because the entire box is not a clickable prompt, or how awkward it is trying to target specific things because of either too many characters on screen, or because the game is not detecting the mouse is over a certain character, like an enemy, so they prefer to just using the keyboard itself, or with the gamepad, which I said the game is designed around. You also deal with the Play Online service, which I will say people over-exaggerate how tedious it is to set up an account and everything going on, but it is still a case of a person realistically shouldn't be able to do all these hoops just to play the game, but it's not nearly as bad as people make it out to be. It's just a whole lot of account creating, and if you already have a Square Enix account or even a Final Fantasy 14 account, then the process will even go faster. Final Fantasy 11 being released before the explosive popularity of World of Warcraft means that this game's design philosophy is way more old school, in the sense that there's less things telling you what to exactly you need to do, no quest markers or stuff like that, but what it makes up for in the pros is just how much more freedom you have in the gameplay. The fact that you can just go to so many different places whenever you want to do it, and even have options like using items turn you invisible to just avoid enemies and stuff like that. Even potentially just helping a friend at a lower level do a late game quest because technically nothing's stopping them just going to those locales. I've been seeing many guides advertise that people just use the invisibility option rather than just finding everything. I'm fighting everything that I see anyway. Or the fact that in this game, you have a main job that you select, and there being more thanks to expansions, but you also get the ability to have a sub job, which you can then level up and supplement the main one, carrying over abilities, buffing stats, and stuff like that. The job system will never die, and this is a cool way of using it. I thank you, Final Fantasy 11. But once again, it's a level of freedom and mix matching any of the many jobs you have in the game. That is something that generally later MMOs wouldn't exactly allow you to do. On top of the fact that the game rarely uses instances, i.e., it really has missions or locales where you're cut off from the rest of the world, just have a personalized version for you, which means you're going through a dungeon or locale, you have every other player around you, which also means potentially they can kill enemies you need to kill for a quest before you can, but it also means you don't even need to be in the same party to ally with each other. I remember specifically late game doing some quests, and we're just all taking turns clearing the way, since we can essentially help each other make a pathway without having to be in the same party, and it's such a cool way of an MMO that oh, I love this kind of stuff. How there's an instance where I'm doing a late game quest and I'm trying to figure out what to do, and me and another player working together trying to do this. We're not in the same party, we're in two separate parties, but we're still helping each other with this quest, even if the quest we're doing requires only one person able to interact with the main object, so we're both fighting over who can solve the thing first. But once again, just a little cooperation being able to do that doesn't require me to be in the same party, and adds to more communication of this being an online game. When it comes to combat itself, they did a pretty good job translating turn-based Final Fantasy into this setting, being the fact of an MMO, you have an auto attack feature, but you also have menus to open up for your job abilities, weapon skills, your spells, your items, and stuff like that. And the more slower paced nature of this means you have more time to react to what's going on, to be able to use your abilities when you need them, which is a super cool aspect to the game that works very well. I know people shrug off, oh, it's so slow paced, but it works in its nature, especially with the game's box also highlighting all the information going on in battle, so you're not able to see everything going on at once. The window will update you what's going on. Although I wish the window didn't keep going with player chats during cutscenes. Like, I know we're all being one world, but the fact that the story moments still show players' conversations, that's a bit awkward for my book. Since the game doesn't really have much of a guide in the way of telling the player what exactly needs to be done, this also means you're trying to do, let's say, just pursue the main story scenario, and can be a bit tricky on what you need to do or where to go, which there are many fan guides and stuff like that, or like the fact that this game actually highlights coordinates specifically in every locale as they tell you where to go. So when you sit in the quest marker, you can just have the coordinates and be, okay, figure out how do I get to this coordinate in this locale, which I think does work very well. Like I said, there are many guides, many fan resources, or you can just ask the players in the game. One of the updates to this game is a mentor system where a more seasoned player is able to act as a mentor towards a new player, and they get rewarded and rated by that player for doing so. So they add an entire system to incentivize socializing other people and having them teach you the ways of the game, which I have never seen MMO actively make into a mechanic. One of the many updates also included the Records of Eminence, an entire system dedicated to not only giving players a sense of direction and what to do when it comes to the quests in the game, because the quests are the side stuff, the missions are the main scenarios. So it helps you give a direction and also rewards you, whether it be for daily objectives, weekly, monthly, just doing random stuff in random locales, all sorts of stuff. So they did add many stuff to give players a sense of direction, and you also get special points that you can use to get gear as well. So there's just many things added to the game to really help players. Hell, there's also the trust system, where you're able to make NPC copies of certain main characters in the game's stories or locales in the kingdoms, which you can then take with you to form into a party. Meaning, you can also play the game relatively fine solo, because you can just make 3 of these copies and take them with you. And if you go further into the last expansion, because you do any expansion right off the bat if you want to, then you can also start summoning in more of these trusts to form an even bigger party as well. So you can also just have an entire party of NPCs with you and don't need to wait for someone or somewhere to go to the locale you're at in order to party up. There's a fast travel system that added in updates that allows you to just go to a place, mark this crystal or this survival guide, and now you're able to just pay a fee to travel between the locales. Which does take the win out of some aspects, like the ships and the airships as well, since you're supposed to be your big main transportation between the locales. But now there's many different ways and easier ways to travel, but hey, going on an airship and being able to go from kingdom to kingdom in 3 minutes and see the game in real time as you go to a locale, it's still entertaining, so let's not knock the airship, even if it's now a bit redundant. Even many quests and missions got altered to reduce the tedium. Not to completely alleviate all difficulty, but they're made simpler. Like, one quest I'm struggling with is a limit break quest we need to do in order to increase your level cap, and I'm following a guide, and the guide said I needed 3 of 3 different key items, but I realized when I pick up 1. I then later realized after many hours that the guide was actually outdated. I only needed 1 of each key item, not 3 of each, and they updated the game to where, while it is invisible, you can just pick up the key item off the ground instead of needing to farm the enemies in the dungeon for it. Once again, they added ways to alleviate issues people have had, specifically just tedium of some of the quests, since it is still a subscription-based MMO that wants to try and take up more of your time. Or some quests you can get the item from an auction house, because some key items can actually just be bought and sold by players as well. So there's just many different ways to try and do these quests and go whatnot. A downside I do have to the gameplay is the sheer size of the maps in this game, because they're all very large. Obviously, to compensate for a large player base, Twister still is, but it does mean having to travel back and forth will take up the most of your time, especially early on when you don't have many of the fashionable points unlocked yet. Or if you're on the free trial period, then you can't even use some of the fashionable systems, typically the Unity warp mechanic, which allows you to just immediately be teleported even to late game locales on the spot and everything. So, in a free trial, you will have to do quests exactly as they intended and can't try and make things easier with either warping to locales or using the auction house until you fully purchase the game yourself. The interface in the game is also that takes getting used to because of its nature of the fact, like I said, it was more based around a PlayStation 2 controller in mind, so there's a lot of clicking through menus. There's also a lot of weird choices like different setting options just being labeled under miscellaneous 2, 3, and 4, and some of those could be major options like changing your keyboard setting, rebinding keys, changing the game's aspect ratio internally, which I didn't know about because the game's freaking installer actually has a setting, but there's a separate one in-game. Damn you, my footage is in 480p now. Or the fact that starting out, you have a very small limit to your inventory, and your equipment takes up space in your inventory, which is why players will incentivize that you go to your Mog house, a personal place for you, and actually put your equipment in the Mog wardrobe so the Moogle will hold it for you, but you're still able to use it, so put any of the equipment you want to wear in your wardrobe and equip it from the menu, freeing up so much space, and you have other ways to increase your inventory size as well. So please make use of the Mog house when it comes to storing your stuff, because oh dear god, you only have like 30 spaces for your inventory and equipment to take up a good chunk of it. Other thing is also turn on auto sort, because then now have the game automatically combine duplicate items, because for some reason by default it does not. There's also another weird quirk where, okay, I understand I'm able to pick up an item because my inventory is full, but there will be moments where I'll get rid of something to make space, and then the item that I couldn't pick up will immediately take its spot, and if I wasn't paying attention, that's several items constantly being automatically added to my inventory the moment space is added, and like I said, your inventory space by default starts getting filled up very fast. Instead of showing you enemy levels, you have the check command, but the check command at times will tell you information that may or may not be consistent. Like sometimes they'll say, oh, enemy has impossible to gauge strength, and it turns out you can beat it just fine, so don't know why it said that. Or it can be times like, this is a decent challenge, and turns out the thing is actually way harder than initially anticipated. I'm like, decent challenge my ass, that thing was destroying me, what the hell? And stuff like that. But most importantly, if it tells you an enemy is too easy and not worthwhile, that means you'll gain no experience from fighting it, so honestly, you might as well not even bother with it. An interesting aspect I find is that there are main story missions that are actually optional. Like you can just technically just skip them, go to the next one. With this game, at points having you repeat main missions in order to gain enough rank points, or you could just get crystals from monsters, give the crystals towards the guards, and now automatically give you rank points, which is a much easier process. Once again, another way of doing it. You don't have to do it the tedious way of just repeating the same missions over and over, unless you just like doing those missions. There's also been a weird decision in recent years by Square Enix, where once a server becomes too populated, their idea of trying to fix it is to essentially just close off the server from any new people from joining, whether that be a new player coming to the game, or someone transferring a character from one server to the other, which is a baffling choice. Like, I just started this game like less than a month ago, and the server I picked, Phoenix, because well, Fantasy 5 created Phoenix, so I might as well pick Phoenix, and Square Enix decided that's the next server they're gonna close off and make it so no new players can join. So it's like one of those things where what's going to happen once every server essentially gets closed down by this metric of this idea of trying to convince people to go to other servers by just removing options? Such a weird way of handling it. And there's been recent talks for the 25th anniversary that they may be looking for a way to actually add in new content into the game, since the player base of Final Fantasy 11 is still thriving. Still many people in the game. You'll still see towns full of people. Early quests, may not see a lot of people. Endgame level quests, you'll see several people coming in all over the place, all with their trust that take up the entirety of my screen. So, once again, very healthy player base for this MMO that's going on 24 years plus. Now for the game's text, which I don't have much to say, much of a kind of MMO sense, you put on a PC in front of you, but I do like the sheer amount of color coding they give to highlight all the different stuff, whether it be an important task, whether it be players shouting, players talking in entire towns, stuff like that, player close by, or it's an item, the area you're in, the little coordinates thing that says the letter and the number, tell you what part of the map you're on. Stuff like that is just easy to read and rather enjoyable when it comes to the game, so there must have been an issue, just the fact that there's a lot of menus in the game, but there's also options to make some of the settings bigger as well when it comes to the text, so they do give you that option on top of increasing or decreasing the aspect ratio of the game itself. So I don't really have much complaint when it comes to the game's text, what's going on. I just wish that when you were in a story cutscene, you didn't have the player's information constantly being put in the box as they're talking all around you. But a cool thing about the window is the fact that it saves so much info to where there's something you missed or something you need to review. Odds are it'll still be in that box and you can just scroll all the way back in order to see that information that you missed. Overall, when it comes to talking about the base experience that can be played nowadays, I have issues with how long it takes to get to places, especially early on and everything, because on a free trial system, so I couldn't, at that time, take advantage of those other mechanics like Unity Warp. Now that I can see why people were finding it confusing. People were complaining about how long it takes to get to places, and seeing the new stuff that cannot put in class with the older design, like, oh, we're just fashionable casual, why do we need airships and stuff like that? But overall, this is a great MMO that I'm glad they still kept going to this day. I've seen people say stuff like, oh, they should just combine the subscription system 11 and 14. To which I go, no, why would 11 players want their sub cost to go up for another MMO that they're not playing? So, no. But just the old school stuff that you can do in the game, the freaking support job system, just so much stuff in this game that is great and just completely holds my attention, even throughout the low points of trying to walk to this place for like the next 20 minutes, but I'll get to that place and I'll get back to enjoying myself with Final Fantasy 11. Now, will it make me crazy enough to go through every single expansion? I'm going to say no, but I don't know, maybe the expansions will be so damn good that it will make me want to go through 300 hours of all the expansions, to which there are many, and nowadays, when you buy the game, especially when it goes on sale, you get all the expansions immediately, and like I mentioned earlier, because it's a more old school game, you don't have to beat the main campaign necessarily of the base story unless you're doing the exact final storyline. But for their campaigns, you can start midway through because you get prompts saying, do you want to see this cutscene start this expansion? You want to start the expansion now? Or, okay, then we'll save this here for later when you come back to it, and they give you the offer, even having some quests that start out at low levels for it. So it's again, just really cool way of handling an old school MMO and everything, and I love it. While the base game story is a lot more world building, I still enjoy it and what it's setting up, everything going on. So like I said about Final Fantasy 11 Online, this is still a damn good MMO, although I'm glad I'm playing it now with all these different improvements, because if I were to walk everywhere all over the place, I may have actually got insane. That's what I said about Final Fantasy 11. Alrighty then, good day.